those Aboriginal lives and stuff, and that stuff kind of drives me crazy. But if you're black and you're actually from a legit native tribe or something like that, I understand. That's where my viewpoint was.
Your people, please.
My people are Kashkan. They're from Mexico, a tribe out of Mexico.
Yeah, that's what the header is satire.
Yeah, I don't know if I read the
Hey, hold
headline up
on.
there
Hold
wrong
on.
because
Hold
it
on a
was just
second. Hold on a
the
second.
headline
The
was a little triggering at first.
little G, hold on a second. The problem is that a lot of people who get on TikTok and who are indigenous descendants, who are spreading anti-black, who go on these lives and are just hella anti-black, have heritage from our parts of the world. And there's a fascination with reconnecting Spanish speaking or people colonized by the Spanish indigenous descendants with punching down on Afro-Indigenous people. And you have come up
Yeah.
in here in this space and you have done exactly that. Do you understand that? That you
No,
are
I
not,
get it.
no. Do you understand that? I asked you a question.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay, so right now, I think what we need you to do is to offer an apology to this space because you did that in front of all these. You just showed that anti-blackness in front of all these indigenous people.
Look, since I am a humbling person, I apologize because I misinterpreted what you guys were trying to do on here, you know? So, my bad.
No, like, no. It's not a, because just because you misunderstood doesn't give you the right to, oh, well, if that's the case, then I take back all the racist shit that I was saying, because like, that's still your thought process, bro.
So what
It's
did
an
I say that
expression
was
thought
racist?
process. Your intent or lack of intent doesn't excuse your impact. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that shit still hit the same. I don't care that, oh, see, I thought y'all were being, no, that shit don't take it back.
Look, I don't.
Well, hold on, real quick, Lil G, real
What's
quick,
up?
Okay. So here's one thing we need to stop doing, and we need Native people brown Native people, because I make the distinction between non-black because any black Native is going to experience anti-blackness, period. However, what we need non-black Native people to do is to recognize and hold themselves accountable for the ways that what they say, whether the person you're talking to has legit indigenous heritage, whether they're confused or whether they, have some off-brand idea of what their indigenous connection is, the fact is that we're all still experiencing that same anti-blackness. You see what I'm saying? So a lot of the comments are still hitting that way, regardless if we're able to be seen as legitimate. And I'm just using your comment and that as an example, right? Because we deal with this all the time. Regardless, like Corey said, if we pass the test or not, right? We still experience and observe the anti-blackness, and we know that that's how people really feel about us. Right. And so we're still having to jump through all these hoops, because at the end of the day, my thing is, and here's my thing, right? I'm very accepting of people that say that they have indigenous heritage, because who am I to judge off that they do or do not? Right. But at the end of the day, it also hits me a type of way as someone who's living in my ancestral territory to have someone that's not in my ancestral territory, that's from down south, telling me who I am and am not. Like, what gives you the right to tell me, who's living in my ancestral territory, that I am not who I am? You see what I'm saying? So there's also this tendency for Latinx natives or people living in so-called Latin America or from so-called Latin America to turn around and to add into that anti-blackness with northern non-black native people towards black native people that are living in their ancestral territory. So we're addressing this because, although understood what you said about the title, and I brought that up when I spoke earlier, a lot of people are going to see that title and think this is one of those conversations. But this is a conversation that we, black people, whether black native, African, anybody in the Black diaspora racialized as Black, regardless of their origin, theory, belief, we need to be having this conversation among ourselves. So, like we said,
Yeah.
or like the sister said, acknowledge that, you know, even if it was a mistake, okay, whatever, but also this is what we're experiencing as people who also have that indigenous heritage routinely on this app and in our videos as well. So that's the long-winded version, but I just wanted to support what Corey was trying to say.
Yeah, no,
Also, I
I
feel
get
the
it.
honor.
I know
I feel
that
like.
my
Go
problem
ahead.
was it's not really with what you guys are talking about. What you guys are talking about is good. I think people should know that. But when it comes to like, there's a lot of people that do these lives and try to discredit the actual indigenous people that were here, and they try to say that no, we were here first or
We
something like.
know,
And that's where the
See, the
trigger
onus
comes
is
in.
on
You
you
know?
to
so
read the room.
Little G, I'm so sorry. This is not protocol, and I'm interrupting you, and that's not protocol, and I'm making that decision because we're not going to give this airtime. I'm being extra hard on you because I expect better from you.
No, I get it.
Okay, it doesn't matter. Any indigenous person experiencing erasure is going to be triggering because we have transgenerational trauma. Okay, intergenerational trauma about whether we are even real. Okay, I get that. That will not ever excuse anti-Black rhetoric. You can still call these people out without anti-Blackness. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
But the way that you came in here, you didn't do that. So we need you to, you apologize. Thank you for apologizing, but we need you to act better in the future and understand that before that stuff comes that comes out of your fingers, you typing, you think.
Yeah.
Who will I be disenfranchising in my words? Will I be erasing Afro-Indigenous people when I speak this way? Call them out. Do call them out, the Aboriginals or whatever. But don't do it using anti-Blackness because that's just punching down on a relative. And I know you get what I'm saying.
And sister, please look at Coco Yuba's comment about we Afro-Indigenous folks experience that same ethnocentric erasure stuff too. We be in those lives as well. And we having a different battle with our own skin folk because they believe we're like, you know, being traitors to them because we have a different belief system because of our connection. Right. So we're experiencing that harm too. So to act like we don't get that harm or that harm's only mainly experienced by brown skinned natives is incorrect. So just wanted to highlight that as well. And again, using this as an example and your comments as an example, because you're willing to listen and understand, because there's other people in the comments that need to hear us say this exact same thing. And we don't get to say this because we get shut down and dropped from lives and yelled and screamed over. So that's why us having the ability to address this is important.
No, I understand. I just wanted to come up here and like make clear that I thought it was something else, you know. But
I appreciate that. Just like next time, the only thing that I really have to add to you is like next time you don't use words like pretending or wabo in your opening addresses. You know what I mean? Because like people like me who are like phenotypically Black, but affected by the Homestead Act, by the birth of my kids and stuff like that. That's nasty as fuck. You know what I'm saying? It's like you walking in and just screaming out hard ER, hard ER, hard ER. Like, just think about what you're doing before you do it.
that time.
I'm gonna say goodbye.
I really appreciate it. Oh, go ahead, Kalala.
I just want to say I gotta go to school, so I'm gonna talk to you guys later. Have a blessed day. Game loho.
Okay. Midwest Queen for all of your mediation. Powerful.
Yes. If I can say thank you so much, especially to the, everyone on this panel. Thank you to the host for, how you've been moderating this conversation. Thank you to everyone here, especially the women and femme people who help establish that boundary and called it out for what it is. A lot of times, as Afro-Indigenous people and Afro-Indigenous descent people, and especially as women and femmes, we get excluded from conversations. We get shut down. We get mocked. We get spoken over. We get yelled at. And so I'm very grateful for this space, and everyone who's helped secure it. So just thank you. because that's hard. And I think that a lot of people need to realize the way that things like STEM and like, misogynoir, specific, racism and or prejudice against Black women in particular, misogyny, the way that it shows up, anti-queer rhetoric, anti-Black rhetoric, the way it shows up. And I think that we need to start doing a better job of holding each other, accountable about the different things that impact our communities, like invalidating people's indigeneity for whatever reason, or I don't know. I'm just very grateful. So thank you.
Hey, may I address two people in the comments real quick?
Go for it.
So at She and at Nika Vicarian said they call themselves that. Why can't we acknowledge them and the damage that they're doing, right? And she said pretendians are a real thing. Here's the thing. I wouldn't give a fuck, even if like I said, I present as a Black man, right? I wouldn't give a fuck if I said nigga 1,000 times. If you ever think that you have the right to call anybody that because they say the word, doesn't mean that you're dead ass wrong, and there's no other way to put it. Like it's not excusable just because they call each other that. Okay, Mexican people call each other way. That doesn't mean that I have the right to because I know they didn't mean cuzzo or some shit like that, call somebody cuzzo. Like, no, bro. Like you're appropriating their culture. Point blank, period. And then you're doing it in a derogatory way, and that's disgusting.
I have something to piggyback off of that, but there is a guest request for Beth Poi, who I've observed many of their lives, and they are a really good ally to Black Native people and give the space that are needed. So LJ, it's your life, whoever you want to add. But I want to piggyback off of that and just say that, to my knowledge, pretendian has been used, by the Indigenous community in general, mainly to address the folks that, when I first started seeing it come about years ago, it was really to address the people in higher ed and academia who were using their supposed Indigenous ancestry, and many of them were extremely white presenting, by the way, but were using their Indigenous ancestry to secure positions in academia. And so that's when I started noticing largely more of that pretendian language coming around for people that were pretending to be Native to gain positions that actually displaced Native people from getting that position and making that income. So how I've seen it trickle down to being used online is that people are, calling those that are practicing erasure or pretending to be Native without being able to have some sort of way to prove that. I've seen that also be applied that way. So I know that I do also use that language because I don't believe in using the term wabo. And so I don't use that, but I do use pretendian as the substitute for that. So I don't experience it in the same way as, what you're saying, but that doesn't invalidate how you're seeing it be used in a way that is anti-Black. So I just wanted to add that. Respect to you, Corey.
No, I appreciate that. I completely get what you're saying because you're lighter passing and whatnot. Yeah.
If I could say this really quickly, I see some people talking about how, the title of the live is misleading and almost using that as an excuse for why they start off saying things like, wabo or pretendian or, essentially go back to Africa, right? But here's the thing. Even when I'm sitting on my see here, I don't know if you all know this, but you can see my background. This has always been my background since I've been on this app. That's the Sierra Leonean flag, which is in West Africa. Okay. I don't know if you can see this mantle behind me. That's the continent of Africa. I don't know if you can see my hair, but these are braids that look like locks. I don't know if you can see my earrings, but these are African earrings. So with that being said, even when I have titles for my lives, it'll be North Carolina Afro-Indigenous history. I can have a picture of any of my Afro-Indigenous ancestors or diasporic members, and I still get the same comments. I've been called the N-word. I've been told, you're African, go back to Africa. I've been told you're lying. I've been called Wabo infinite times when I'm literally just discussing my history. So even if the title, and I think that's why sometimes it's important. This is something in my culture as a Gullah Geechee African American Afro-Indigenous person. Culturally, we were taught to listen before speaking. Because in this space, if you all were to, I understand being triggered, but if you were to listen before speaking, I think you would understand what the contents of the conversation are. And the thing is, even if you are triggered, being triggered is not an excuse to be anti-Black, racist towards people. It's not an excuse to be anti-Indigenous. It's not a reason to be transphobic, homophobic, misogynist, anything like that. That's not an excuse. Right. If someone is being anti-Black towards me, that doesn't, so that if someone who has indigeneity to, places in what is now colonially known as Latin America, even if they are being anti-Black to me, does that mean that I start being xenophobic? Does that mean I should say go back to Mexico? Does that mean I should say, haha, you don't know your indigenous language? That still wouldn't make any of my responses right. That's still wrong, right? And even the demand for results, you could go to my page, but a lot of people won't do that. So I say that to say, regardless of how information is, at least on the screen, that doesn't give you an excuse, kind of piggybacking on what other panelists said, that doesn't give you an excuse to be anti-Black racist. That doesn't give you an excuse to be anti-Indigenous by denying those who are, Afro-Indigenous. And if you're going to be that way towards those who are, Afro-Indigenous, then why is that energy not replicated for those who are mixed European and Native and have a more European phenotype? But I'm going to go ahead and turn off my mic now.
Period. Love you. Can the other folks bring themselves into the chat and introduce themselves?
Yeah, I go by Juke. I was just scrolling by, listening to y'all's conversation a little bit. What do you call it? I mean, all I want to just kind of chime in about, a little bit related to the title and everything of that sort. What do you call it? I just want people to really, take a step back of, getting hung up on what people think about, their history or maybe their ancestry. And one of the biggest things that I hate to hear, especially in right now world, is, people continuing to divide themselves further from the people that, they share the street with or they share the neighborhoods with and things of that sort. There's always like this fine line that just feels like has to be drawn of what separates me from you and from this person to the next person, which is we all have a good understanding that whenever we're brought to this world, we're very special and we're very one of a kind of our own selves. And when I constantly hear people talking about, just in general, race, color, ancestry, history, which is amazing, it's beautiful, but it also throws like a big division between you and that person you may be sharing information with, or and it's probably something that's not collectively trying to be interpreted that way. It's just oftentimes, I'm not sure if y'all hear it, but they're like, hey, if we can stop talking about race and putting race into everything, all this stuff about race and division will all disappear. And it's honestly the truth. What do you call it? And I just want to basically add that, the title of the live saying that, the so-called African Americans being the original natives. Now, my honest opinion, from the research and coming up, the way I came up with, I do see that there's a lot of, a lot of spiritual and maybe even, not even maybe, but spiritual and a lot of power between the African American people when it comes to history. And there's no denying it. Some people, yes, in day and age, they try to cover up Black history and, they try to hide it for, a number of reasons. And I honestly think one of the most reasons is because they want to basically hide how really powerful and how, great the African American people are. what do you call it? And, I think there's a real fine history between the African Americans that's being left out in this day and age, as far as, information that we feel like, should be evenly shared and whatnot. But of course, we don't live in fairy tales. We know that information like that, it would unite, the Black community. Not only that, it would, unite a lot of communities all around. So they suppress this information to, make it to where it's like more of like, everyone has to prove their point. Everyone has to fight for, their 15 minutes type thing. And it's just not right. I think everyone's equally, special. I think everyone, has been put on this earth by God or a higher power, and all serve a higher purpose. And I don't think our higher purpose at any given time is to be sitting down and, basically explaining, of why they're divided from other people. I think we should all just try to find ways to come closer together rather than, just pointing out all the differences between, everybody. I think everyone in this live would want to see, everybody happy. I think everyone in this live would want to see everyone doing great, for regardless of the skin color, whatever, where their background is. I'm sure everybody wants to see everybody do great. And we all know life's a B word. We know this life is very, very hard. And, we don't got to keep confusing people and throwing this stuff at people to make them feel like, oh man, like, am I this? Am I that? I don't even know. I haven't, people talking about this. Like, it just puts a lot of division and confusion, to people. And I want to try to see, about having conversations that just basically don't feel like, it's someone having to prove their case or prove their end. I just want it to be totally just like an even playing field, no division. Like, I want to have a conversation where color doesn't come about. I know I joined the live talking about African Americans as far as what the live said, which is,
Hey, Drew, may I interrupt you for a
no
moment?
problem. Yeah, go ahead.
What is your ethnic background, please?
So I call myself Caucasian. I just have a Mexican family, background, but I was born and raised in America. I grew up around, white folks, some Hispanic folks in my family. What do you call it? So that would technically be my ethnicity.
So you're
That's
white?
what I go by.
Your
Wait,
license
yeah.
white?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Your license says white?
Yes, it does.
All right, bet.
Okay, so we don't have the same agenda right now. What we're talking about is a conversation that needs to happen, and so we can't have this idealistic approach that we wish we didn't have to go through this, because we actually do have to go through this. So if it's not an identity that you can understand that, then we are not sharing the same common goal right now. So we appreciate the things that you said, but we need to pass the mic on to Beth Poi so that we can keep the conversation on topic.
Yeah,
Because
no worries. I just wanted to
if you
share
look
what I
at the
wanted to share.
comments, yes, if you look at the comments, you will see that we are not in the place to have that neutral conversation, because the comments are going off right now that are excluding Black people from the actual intersectional identities that we have. So with that being said, we're going to move on to Beth, and thank you
I
for trying
appreciate the
to
live, guys.
share.
Yeah, but
Thank
like I
you for
said,
trying to
I just
share
wanted to
your.
come in and just share that little peace of mind. I appreciate y'all hearing me out. Whoever liked my profile, I appreciate y'all. Y'all have a
And
great evening,
one
great
one thing,
conversation.
Thanks for sharing. We appreciate
Almighty,
it.
before you drop,
What's up, buddy?
look at your family that you said is from Texas, or your family that you said is also Latina Keys. Look into where they come from, because I'm looking at you and I see what looks like an indigenous relative. So look into that. Okay.
No worries at all, for sure.
All right.
Thank
Peace.
y'all again. Y'all have a great evening.
Blessings
Well,
to you.
third thing that
That's what you bring.
Latinos on
Go ahead.
census are white,
We know.
It was given, stop talking
Can
about it, and let's move on.
Beth, can you bring yourself into the space, love? Thank you for your patience.
Oh, no problem at all. Hide, my name is Beth, or you can call me Poi. Honestly, either one's fine. I requested when Little G came up here because, oh my goodness, the stuff coming out of his mouth. But I think that you guys are all amazing. I'm loving you all. I'm loving this conversation. am hating this comment section, not even gonna lie. I am Indigenous, or I'm Native American, and it literally kills me to see people down here not only erasing our Afro-Indigenous cousins, but participating in, you guys are participating, not the panel, but the comment sections, you're participating in the erasure of yourselves. Just because somebody doesn't look the way you expect them to look, just because they don't present the way you expect them to present, does not mean they are not Native American, does not mean you have any right to sit up here and call them slurs. I'm going to say slurs because that W word, that's a slur. And if you are Indigenous or Native American and you are calling that to an Afro-Indigenous or just a African American person in general, that's disgusting. Stop erasing yourselves, stop erasing our cousins, and stop throwing around blood quantum like you're some type of show dog. Because you're not. We are Native. This is our home. And if somebody comes to you and tells you that, I'm so sorry, oh my God. If somebody comes to you and tells you that, this is my home too, and I'm, and I either know this for a fact or I'm trying to figure out where exactly I belong, it is not your job to turn them away because chances are somebody is already doing that to them. You can be African American and you can be Native American at the same time. They don't have to choose who they want to be, because I've been seeing that in the comments too, and it kills me. Yeah, just do better. Listen to them speak, because what they're telling you is the truth, whether it's their truth or just the truth in general. All your job is to listen to them, and if you don't want to listen to them, all you have to do is go away, because there's already enough people out there closing off the Native community, and we don't need everyone taking part of that.
Thank you, Miigwech, Beth. For those of y'all in the comments who are railroading the topic and telling us what it is and it's not about, then it's probably not a conversation for you, and you're welcome to leave. However, what we are discussing is a conversation that needs to happen between the Black diaspora and those that hold Indigenous heritage to specifically the United States. This is an Afro-Indigenous safe space. So if you got some type of issue with us discussing what we're discussing, then you're welcome to move on out. Because a lot of us have had conversations and run-ins and headbutts and comment section threads with a lot of folks in these comments that have been very anti-Black towards many of us. And we need to, and we're going to address what we got to address. So whether you like it or not, it don't, that ain't nothing off my back. At the end of the day, we're going to say what we got to say. I really wish Kalala would come back up, because your facilitation was so on point. But yeah, much appreciation for just the siblings on this panel. And LJ, again, thank you for hosting this, because every single one of us has experienced Indigenous erasure from the Native American community. And we've experienced being erased and having our Blackness challenged, and basically experiencing internalized anti-Blackness from those who believe that they are Indigenous to this continent and not Africa. So we deserve to take a space in this conversation, because it is impacting us, and we're experiencing a lot of lateral violence on both ends, and it's not cool. And we just need space to speak our piece. And so that's what's happening, period.
And Moni, you definitely doing your thing as well, keeping it together. So I appreciate that so much. And if I can say, this kind of reminds me of I appreciate this space, because as someone who is just identify as monoracially Black, right? When I talk about my Afro-Indigenous ancestry, when I talk about, myself as, because my grandfather was Afro-Indigenous, and when I talk about, my Gullah Geechee heritage, and because my father's Gullah Geechee, and my Gullah Seminole roots, because my grandmother Juanita's people come from Spanish Florida and are Gullah Seminole, right? And so what I constantly find is that people take, again, like I said, one look, and it's just and the message that I get is, oh, I'm not light enough to talk about my ancestry. I'm not light enough my hair's not straight enough to talk about my great grandparents or my grandparents or my parents. My nose isn't thin enough to be able to talk about, my history, because I constantly say in my lives all the time, sometimes it's like I want to make shorter videos, right? If you've ever seen my page, I talk about a lot of these things, like how Afro-Indigeneity connects to my various family lineage. And so it's really, and I constantly have to say, hi, I'm Thonya. I'm a Gullah Geechee African American and Afro-Indigenous descendant with roots on da 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 da. Because if I don't, then it's going to be immediate anti-blackness. It's going to be N-word, wobble, wobble, da 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 da. And so it's just like thinking about, sometimes even I think people don't consider it's just like the phenotypic privilege that it takes to just be able to share your family history.
Thank you, Beth.
Miigwech, Nathonia. Miigwech. Creole girl, bring yourself into the space if you're ready to do so. Let us know what you think about everything we've been talking about.
We had, and I see a lot of stuff in the comments, and we need to have our safe space, and a lot of people come in our safe space and they disrespect that. So let's just tread lightly with our safe space, because we don't come over to their lives and do this what they're doing in the comments.
Yes, we do not. And that's another thing that needs to be touched on is people choose not to distinguish or discern between the ways that we show up in different spaces. And they tend to basically assign us all the exact same motive and intent without even doing the background checks that they could be doing to see what kind of context we have or what conversation we're coming to have. Because at the end of the day, like I said, we experience the erasure and the lateral violence from both individuals who are erasing Indigenous Americans and from non-Black Native Americans. And we all know we don't experience the same litmus test as the super light and white presenting Native people do. So at the end of the day, we see each other fighting for our lives in these comment sections. And this topic is important. So as addressed when I first hopped into the live, our people need to have a discussion. And by our people, I'm talking about those in the Black diaspora. We need to have a discussion that sets aside some of the back and forth between the Native diaspora and the Black diaspora. And we need to have this discussion in Black space and or in Black led space so that others can observe if they want. But we need to have this discussion with our people, right? Because we're going to come at it from a whole different way. And the main thing that is holding up or causing a lot of harm in these types of lives is the anti-Blackness together with the Indigenous erasure, right? It makes sense to get triggered by one or the other, but the anti-Blackness is something we all experience if we are Black, even if we are also Native. And so for a lot of us, we're bumping heads with people in our own Native communities because they continuously are anti-Black towards us and around us, but seem to not understand how that's showing up or why we're saying that. Just like the brother that was on earlier, Lil G, he said, I'm not anti-Black. First of all, you can't tell anybody that you're not anti-Black because anti-Blackness is internalized inside of all of us, right? It's as Nathonia has presented many times, it's that, that idea of caste. Blackness is on the bottom. And if anything, you have an oppressed identity, a marginalized identity. You have an identity that has experienced colonial trauma and continues to do so. But if you are not Black, you will not experience that. Those of us that have that identity will also experience that. And so that's what a lot of people are choosing to not recognize and are choosing to continue to express their prejudice and their beliefs of basically that Black people don't have forms of indigeneity or our forms of indigeneity are beneath theirs. And so that's really hard for us to see for those of us, especially that have both or that are connected to African indigeneity. And we see brown skinned or, non-Black natives basically continuing to try to exist in this space of caste where we're still at the bottom, even when we have an intersectional identity with them.
Yes, ma'am. All of that. All of that. All of that.
Colorism, please, because the colorism is a big old thing.
Yes. Yeah, no, most definitely. Like, even talking about specifically, for those who have roots stemming from the Southeast. So again, my Afro-Indigeneity comes from North Carolina and Florida. And if you know history, like, unless, especially like, because the closer you are to the equator, the darker you are. So we're talking my ancestors and my relatives and community members. It's just like African dark skin. Native people closer to the equator also have a darker complexion. And so a lot of times, phenotypically, we don't present like the stereotypical Native American, chief on the pack of cigarettes that everybody expects indigenous people to look like. There are indigenous people, with valid indigeneity to North America with no outside ancestry from Europe or Africa who have round noses, who have, dark brown skin, who have different eye shapes. And so a lot of times people try to homogenize this idea of what it means to be native in accordance with a Eurocentric beauty standard and in accordance with this premise of mestizaje. And so it's just like there'll be times even it's just like this idea that it's like you have to be a particular complexion. It's just like if you're it's like you can't be too dark or you can't have too many Afro features. And it really kind of goes along with historically, how we were racialized, like this idea that, you had to pass the pencil test. So for those who are Afro-Indigenous, in the 1930s, the U.S. Census, they gave instructions to the census takers because there were large populations of Afro-Indigenous people. So we literally had to go through a litmus test. Like they would put pencils in our hair, and if our hair would hold it, then our hair was too coarse to be considered native. If they would take coins and literally like metal objects like this and scratch against our skin, and they would look at it. And if it was too red, if it wasn't like having enough redness to it, then we were too dark to be considered native. They would measure our nose shape. If it was too wide, then they would literally like look into Walter Plecker and really eugenicist studies that really tried to phenotypically figure out who was more what. And then going forward, that would bones. Sorry, that's my dog. That would determine, how we could be enrolled. But this idea of what a Native person should look like has really historically excluded a lot of people. And so when people see pictures of Afro-Indigenous people, they always just discredit it. And it's just like, wait, so why are Native people who are mixed African somehow less worthy of acknowledgement? Because they're not mixed European? It's just like, why are Afro-Indigenous people who have more African phenotypic features, why is it that their blood quantum is demanded more than, their non-Afro native relative? Why is it that, we have to present in a regalia or be fluent in our language in order for someone to try to consider us any form of indigenous, but yet a blonde hair, blue eyed professor can just decide to write, native on their application to get a job. And then they're immediately open arms accepted. Right. But that's just my piece. I'm kind of tangenting on, and I might have to dip in a little bit. Thank you, Blessing. I use they, them pronouns, but I'm also not mad at she, her. I just don't use he, him pronouns. But I'm actually working from home, so I might have to dip in a little bit. But if I do, thank you for sharing the space, and thank you to everyone.
Nathania, we love you. If you really trying to learn and you really trying to listen, please follow our PhD candidate, Nathania. So much appreciation for all the labor that they share and all of the times that they have been patiently just teaching people from the comments and from the panel, and all the times that they've had to experience people basically being disrespectful and anti-Black towards them, even with all of the wonderful and patient information and education that they share. So for that, misogynist, you don't deserve. Just want to give you your props and your flowers.
Bless, and all the same. Thank you for sharing the space and all you do.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was going to say, I have never heard of that pencil test before. That literally just blew my mind.
in
Oh my
the
God.
1930s, they would do all sorts of tests to see whether or not we were more phenotypically Black or Native. And, so if we were Afro-Indigenous, our features had to be more European presenting or very strong Native phenotype in order to be able to proceed to be a part of enrollment and or to be categorized in the census as Native. Even if we were legitimately part of our community, they would go from house to house and they would say, okay, what's this person? What does this person look like? So you could be in the same household, and literally just because your phenotypes are different, the Census Bureau would write down a different racial categorization for you than your sibling who has the exact same blood quantum as yourself.
Been happening before Black people had a say in being able to define themselves, even if they're defining themselves in a way that's not historically accurate. That erasure has been happening way before this. So, like I mentioned before in other lives, it's low hanging fruit to go after other marginalized people, especially when they'll experience anti-Blackness and you will not. To go after that low hanging fruit of making your platform all about attacking them and their beliefs when you know it's not right, just don't do it, because there's no reason to do that other than to feel more secure in your identity and to secure your standing with your social group. If you know it's not right, don't engage, at the end of the day, because it ends up hurting those that are a part of your community. And a lot of times we experience these litmus tests anyways by those inside of our community, because many of us, because of the reasons Nathonia outlined, of being separated from Indigenous communities because of racial classifications, because there were very stringent lines upon which people with African ancestry were identified as only being able to be seen as Black, and had to erase that Indigenous heritage, at least socially, that we were literally separated on purpose from our Indigenous connection. So then to turn around and say, speak your language, tell us exactly who your people are, all of these things is another form of basically making us jump through all of these tests that we cannot complete or perform because white supremacy and colonization made it that way. Right. So that's another form of lateral violence. So at the end of the day, even though it might be protocol to ask people where they're from or to ask people who their family are, people don't know. That should not be the defining way that you decide that someone does not have the heritage that they say that they have. No matter how misinformed they might be, that still does not mean they don't have that heritage. It's just much easier to attack them when they don't have information that makes historical sense and information that basically allows it so that you can more easily accept them into Indigenous community. So that's something that I've been noticing that I wanted to speak on.
Quite frankly, if you need to bring down other Indigenous people to feel secure in your indigeneity as like a Native American, you might need to go speak with your elders or your ancestors because something is missing from your life.
Yeah, there was someone in the comments.
Well,
They were
if you gonna any type of Creole, can we just get some of the natives to at least do a little bit of research before they come attacking us, please? Because I'm starting to see a lot of that. And if you don't know Creole history, please stop calling us wabos and pretendians. I'm gonna need for y'all to do some type of research. Just start somewhere because the attack is getting out of hand. Please.
The information is out there, huh?
Oh yeah.
I swear
Do
to
you want
God.
do you want to speak on that more, sis? More on what is happening as far as erasing Indigenous identity of Creole people?
Knowledge at all. For the ones of us who do have it, we're steadily getting attacked every day. It's not. It's starting to get out of hand because I'm not, if you, whatever type of Native American you are, I'm not going to speak on it if I don't go do my research. You get what I'm saying? So for people to speak on Creoles and not know the background and not know majority of us have indigenous roots, it's getting tiring that we have to keep explaining ourselves. If you don't want to accept it, that's cool. But to sit up here and say that we don't have indigenous roots or indigenous ancestry, the attacks are daily. And I'm seeing some people that's in the comments, like Ann Apache. I see her. She attack all type of Afro-Indigenous. I don't even know why she's in here because I've seen her attack so many people. But can we just respect the Afro-Indigenous and Creole communities, please? It don't matter if they're from South Carolina, North Carolina, whatever, Gullah Geechee. Please start respecting these communities. Whether you like it or not, we're here to stay. We have indigenous ancestry, indigenous roots, and we're not going anywhere. And you don't have to like it, and you don't have to come into our space. Just know that we're not going nowhere, and you can either accept it or not.
Erasure safe space either on any account. So when we're saying things like, okay, thank you, mods. We got good mods. But so, at the end of the day, we can't have these conversations without, basically having to address the prejudices and having to address all the isms that go along with it. But at the end of the day, again, I think that there's something to be said about the fact that there has to be an acknowledgement that, just like we were forced to basically disconnect from our indigenous communities, for those of us that have that ancestral heritage here, specifically in the United States, indigenous people also had to disconnect from us as having those that had Black indigenous heritage. And we're still not even touching on the fact that indigenous and Black relationships, or the fact that we had proximity to each other in certain spaces and places in the United States due to history occurred. And that is not something that people can continue to minimize and act like did not happen, and act like it was just, act like it is something that happened that is a negative thing, right? Somebody, even the brother that was on earlier who says he identifies as white, but has, I believe he said Mexican or Texan family. Even that brother was saying, like, there's been so many, even on a spiritual level, powerful components that have been brought into this space, right? We carried our spirituality with us here. And that is something Indigenous should recognize Indigenous. You know what I mean? And so that for me has been wild to see as a person with both lineages. It's like, how do you not recognize that hoodoo and voodoo is indigenous practice? Like, how do you not recognize that even though we had to synchronize many things with Christianity, we have still very indigenous rituals that we are still practicing as Black diasporic people, right? Even certain things that we don't do that are tied to spiritualities that we learn from our families and the matriarchs in our families is very similar to the things that non-Black natives practice and how much they revere the matriarchs in their families. There are so many parallels that you got to be damn near not looking on purpose to miss it. And that's a lot of what I see happening on here.
For real, for real.
Would you disconnect? Again, that's the same thing of rubbing it in the face of what white supremacy did. We did not disconnect. White supremacy disconnected us. And any Native person should understand that, meaning that we have Native people that aren't connected to their own cultures, don't speak their languages, are assimilated into white culture, passing as white. Like, come on, don't act like you don't understand the basics.
Even just like, even if you're only Native American or you're Native European, there was a time in, not so distant history where our people were forcibly assimilated to being white, forced to disconnect from our families, forced to disconnect from our people to be white. We all know boarding schools, right? The Catholic Church. So why is it such a hard step to think that, in the history of people being erased in a history where people are erased for being anything but white, why is it so hard to believe that it could happen on more than one account? In more than one.
Because that is anti-Blackness. It's believing that your experience is the worthy and valid experience and Black people's experience is not.
Y'all like these beaded hoop earrings I made?
I was gonna say those are cute.
Yeah, you did a good job. Look at you.
That's nice.
And I just made this for my brother-in-law. He wrestles, so he wanted like a medallion, this piece with like a necklace.
Okay, Beater, we see you. Look at you. That's really good.
It's ugly. I mean, it's my first one. I think it's ugly, but thank you.
No, it's not ugly. It looks great. You did a great job.
Not
It's all
ugly
true
at
reflect.
all. And the fact that it's your first one is super impressive because it looks amazing. And beading is hard.
It's easy once you get the hang of it. Y'all, my power went out, so now I got to leave early to go to my sister's to wash, because I got to wash before I go to work.
I know that's right. Thank you so much for hosting. Your hair is looking lovely and luscious and bouncy and springy.
Curious.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Thank you
My
so
cousin
much.
beaded me a lighter leash. Look, it's got a buffalo
Oh, that
nipple.
looks good. Oh, that looks really good. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes, and beads,
Culture
beads
is
are
literally a whole
cross-cultural.
vibe right now.
Period. We have beading in Africa, and we have beading
I love
in
that
Native
buffalo.
America.
That's fire.
Yeah, I think a lot of people realize that we identify as indigenous because we were able to, we're a tribal still in Africa and in the Americas, so we are still tribal people and we're able to hold on to those, tribal communities. But yeah, I really love hosting these lives and letting, people able to speak their piece because like y'all said, we're always dropped or yelled at, this shit's aggravating. I hate it. I like to have, productive conversation.
Thank you for being on space, beloved. I'm gonna peace to everybody. Thank you for being a part of the conversation. I think I'm following everybody on the panel. So Miigwech and O'Shea, thank you in Yoruba.
Have a
thank
Bye,
great
you so
y'all.
much, everybody. And thank you to the Native
Yeah, thank you
Americans
for
that
letting me up,
came
LJ.
respectful. Thank you,
You're
Beth.
welcome.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
How do you drop? There we go.
All right. I'll see y'all later. I'm gonna go live tomorrow before I go to work. Okay.
Bye.
All right. Bye, Creole. Oh,